Facebook has recently started reminding me of what it hopes are good memories from the past. Last week, you know where this is going. Last week, a picture taken about 5 years ago came across my Facebook feed. Newlyweds, it said. Adrian and I were 4 months into our marriage, and I remember that picture. But the memories associated with it aren't that great. I mean, it was taken the week that my 10-month-old dog Sheldon had decided he was part goat and therefore totally capable of swallowing and digesting half a tennis ball. And it turns out, to be fair, he was capable of swallowing it, but the digestion part proved much harder. At 9 p.m. on Tuesday, while we were rushing him to the emergency vet, our sadder and wiser dog decided to try to undo the damage that he'd caused by throwing up 3 times in our car. Sadly, the tennis ball was the only thing that stayed down. And 24 hours later, and a bill that I could barely look at without getting nauseous myself, on Wednesday night, the dog was back from the hospital, safe and sound, but my daughter Bailey and I were not. We were guests at the hospital for sick people because that's where they look after children who collide at center ice and mildly bruise their brain. 48 hours later, and 2 days of missed school, Bailey and dog were both thankfully on the mend. And as you can imagine, Adrian and I spent Thursday night in an uncomfortable state of anxiety, wondering which one of us was going to be the next medical emergency. We were exhausted. From 2 very late nights, the chores were piling up and nobody had found time to grocery shop. And we sat exhausted on the sofa, staring at the mountain of laundry that needed to be folded. And I looked over at him and I said, "Remember on our wedding weekend where we sat in front of the fireplace, cuddling and dreaming about what marriage might look like?" And I just wonder if the disciples ever turned to Jesus after long, long days of healing and exorcisms and verbal sparring with the Pharisees, and if they ever said to him, "You remember that first wedding? 3 days after you recruited us, the one where you showed us who you were by doing that really cool thing with the wine?" Well, to be honest, Jesus, I mean, we kind of thought our ministry would maybe involve more of that sort of thing and, well, less of the touching lepers and hanging out with the homeless and getting into trouble with the authorities and that stuff. But there is a difference, isn't there, between a wedding and a marriage, between a community celebration and a ministry. Jesus and the disciples left the celebration in Cana and began a 3-year journey of justice making, of healing and relationship building. The first act after the wedding celebration was to drive the moneylenders out of the temple and make it a sacred place once more. And Jesus followed that up with healing people like Nicodemus and the woman at the well through relationships of care. He raised children and Lazarus from death, and he healed the desperate that came begging for help. And he taught the disciples to do the same thing. And all the while, John tells us, they were shunned by their own communities and hunted by the powerful. No wonder the disciples would have preferred to stick to winemaking. And when you think about all the miracles or signs of God's kingdom, as John calls them, that Jesus performs, the one that stands out as being different from all the others was the water turning into wine. Why would God perform such a luxurious, extravagant miracle as the first sign of Jesus' activity, of Jesus' divinity? What was that abundant overflowing of wine all about? And the more I think about the Cana celebration in light of events like my own wedding or our church's 100th anniversary that happened in that same year, the more I think that it wasn't just about making believers out of the disciples. They'd already chosen to follow him. I think he performed the miracle as a gift for the young married couple, for his mother, as a gift perhaps for the disciples and maybe even himself, and maybe for us as well. You see, because a celebration sets the tone for the future as much as it marks the past. And Jesus would have known that. After all, the average wedding ceremony in his day lasted for 7 days. No wonder the wine ran out. And the 7-day wedding in Cana was meant to be sustenance for the journey, for the couple's journey, for the disciples. And the wine, a touchstone experience of God's abundance. And heaven knows, we need such touchstone moments of celebration and abundance in our life that we can draw on later. We need to feel God's overflowing love and care for us in special moments like our wedding day, or last February when we had the celebration of God's abundance here, or even in the news at the announcement time of the abundance. We need these moments that we can draw on when times get tough and uncomfortable. For the times when you clean dog vomit off your back seat, and the more upsetting times when you sit next to a loved one in hospital. When the couple from Cana faced their very first loss together, I wonder if the memory of that special time, when they basked in the love of friends and family and saw God's love poured out for them, if that memory sustained and inspired them. When Mary saw her son hanging from a cross, I wonder if she leaned on the memory of all the times that God sent angels to comfort and walk with her. I wonder if on the last night of his life, if Jesus looked back on that very first miracle, to the time he'd only been with his disciples for 3 days, and if he smiled a little, found courage a little, and was propelled forward a little by the abundance and joy he felt being showered on him by God's gift of that day. There's a scene, from Les Miserables, when all the young students, only hours away from their death, raise their glass and say, "Drink to me, drink with me to days gone by, to the life that used to be. Let the wine of friendship never run dry, at the shrine of friendship never say die. Drink with me to days gone by." And they sing a song about all the touchstone moments in their lives, the women they loved, the friendships they forged, and it's a song that galvanizes them for the battle ahead. And I wonder if there are moments of celebration in your life, moments that make you smile. Maybe it's a Christmas moment, or a celebration like the 100th, or a more personal day of celebration that you cherish. And I invite you to bring to mind one or more of your favorite moments, a time you can look back on and see God's abundance being bestowed on you, like the overflowing wine at Cana. These are your memories of God's abundance. You can touch those memories anytime and feel the power to help sustain you in whatever challenges you face today. The wedding day is sustenance for the disciples' journey. for a life that is both celebration and challenge. There would be many other such moments on their journey, times when Jesus and the disciples would celebrate again, share wine and food together. But in between those times of celebration, there was a ministry. And we have a ministry, a life we lead in service to God. And we can each make a choice, like that day in Cana, to leave the party behind and follow Jesus to the bedside of the sick, to welcome the questioning Nicodemuses, to invite the outcast to table. I mean, we could have hardly called Jesus' life a ministry if he'd stuck to winemaking. And you could hardly call it a marriage if you never took off your wedding clothes and rolled up your sleeves to help build a life. And you could never call us God's church if we stayed insular and abandoned the call to be open to Spirit, open to you. So here we are, coming to this Sunday morning moment, bringing our praise and our pain to God, and trusting that the divine love still flows as freely as the wine at Cana did. And as we leave the party, we follow Jesus into the world of ministry. And we remember the gift of being in community with one another, with God. Here, we find what we need: sustenance for the journey, a touchstone moment of hope for the work ahead, and Christ who knows the way.